Laura, thanks for joining us today. Want to get your thoughts on the cuts that you have put in place, especially given the fact that it looks like you're maintaining a buy on the stock.
Yeah, so I wanted to build on add a couple insights to Roger's prior comments. One is I think the market is not looking through COVID anymore. One of the things we did in our note is we lowered estimates, but we left the September quarter and December quarter intact. But we made the point that if COVID must pass June 1st, the supply chain won't be able to start building new products for the annual Apple new product release, and it could disrupt Christmas selling season, which would then be in the next fiscal year for Apple, which is fiscal 21. So I do think some of what's happening with Apple is that we need to start looking at timeframes as COVID goes longer and figure out at what point Christmas gets disrupted, and then, assign some probability for that. So that's the first thing I add as an insight to what Roger was saying about Apple specifically.
All right. Roger, I want to get your thoughts on this, too. I mean, when you look at Apple, is it a canary in the coal mine in terms of the supply chain discussion and also demand? Yeah,
to me, the really important thing to look at is this, in fact, a new flu strain, right? They're talking about the possibility that because it's architected similarly to flu, it could be one of those things that comes back every single year. So it disappears when the weather warms up and then comes back in the fall every year. And at this point, it appears to be both more contagious and obviously a lot more dangerous than the flu. So if it comes back in the fall, Laura could be, in effect, get away with June because it may be that it goes away seasonally, but that it comes back in the fall. And if it does, that's the thing to really watch out for, because then the spread of it would begin a whole new cycle. And it's going to be super hard if things calm down in the summer to stop all air travel, at Labor Day and, without actual evidence that there's a problem.
Yeah, Laura, you mentioned June 1st, but I'm also thinking about how much domestic travel and gatherings in particular are being disrupted. At what point do we get concerned about WWDC, about Google developer events, and kind of the marketing impact of those in building these platforms that are so important to those companies? Now, granted, they haven't said anything about delaying or changing their practices around those gatherings, but you have to imagine they've at least got to put out some message about that in the next few weeks.
Well, I mean, I think under abundance of caution, all those people are online people. If those developers, it's possible that even if Facebook held or Apple held a developers conference, no one would come. And they're all online guys. I mean, you're talking about the online world, so they have to stay home a year in order to keep their health and safety. Like, that's a better idea anyway. It's more like apparel. Can you hit like apparel numbers, stuff that actually requires physical space to sell Christmas products? The other point I wanted to make is half of our lowering of estimates in March was China demand. Like, China is a massive consumer market, and those people are largely staying home right now. So we can't underestimate the consumer demand impact on worldwide GDP for lots of consumer products in addition to Apple products, in addition to the supply chain conversation we're having now.
Yeah, Laura, just to dig into that a little bit more, how much of that could ultimately be recouped? And I asked that in part because Dan Niles earlier on our show, made the point that if folks maybe in China, for example, are not feeling as rich, what that's going to mean for consumption. When we're talking about a higher priced iPhone, does all of a sudden the discussion maybe in households start to be, do we do something more affordable right now, given the dent that pocketbooks, have taken from people not being able to go to work, for example?
Yeah, I think this notion that consumers are digging into savings while they're not going out and either going to work or earning as much money, I think really could have a longer-term negative consumer effect. I do think that is ultimately, the question is there pent-up demand, or does demand actually not show up ever? And then do you swap out of the Apple ecosystem? In the first world, my guess is you probably you just push off when you buy the next phone. By the way, one of the things that's at risk here is Apple was supposed to introduce a lower price SE2 phone in the current quarter, and I think, Peter, people are pretty sure that's not happening. So exactly trying to fight what you're saying, which is get a lower priced iPhone out there for some of these markets, isn't going to happen as quickly. So you end up with higher priced iPhones and higher ASPs at Apple than they wanted.
That's certainly that dynamic, the inflationary dynamic of the supply chain interruption, is what we're hearing about. Cars, drugs, paper, clothes, phones, right? I mean, we're going to construction equipment.
We're in the 12th year of a bull market, and supply chains are global. They're very brittle. So breaking them is something we really have to pay super close attention to. And Laura's just described what? And you've just described a dozen different areas where this is going on. It would be naive to assume there's not going to be a profound impact on somebody. And I think Apple, having volunteered itself, is catching a lot of flack here. But I suspect this is going to be felt much more broadly. And John, I don't know about you, but if somebody said to me trade shows could now be entirely online, I would view that as a huge win.